I'm surprised you brought it in. I turned the lights on when you said.
I'm gonna say.
How are you?
Excellent. From excellent upwards.
There's two different holders, and one stays with two, and then you never know what you're gonna do, so you never end up with five holders. Somebody made a two punch.
Doing? All right. Okay. Good. There you go. I was center console. Yeah.
Down there,
Okay, man. Yeah.
Thank you.
There's a bad chair?
Yeah, the one wheel falls off.
Oh, yeah, I got that one.
Yeah.
I thought we fixed it. This been like 2 years since the wheel comes
No,
off of that thing.
it was fixed. I broke it 2 weeks ago. We need 4, 7.
Here's that.
He's not good. And I heard Mr. Miller.
Yes, he's getting both cabs.
He could be a trend.
Old track.
Yeah. I think,
You just packed it, was it?
think a
Or
bunch
a
of
mattress, the mattresses. are
sofas
packed,
and, you know, desks and.
Large quantities.
Our house is just plug it out, and then if they have the schedule, they leave it. Well, normally they just take you, but if they don't, they leave you a note on your mailbox that says, if we couldn't take it today, we'll be here.
Monday.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, man,
I
they
think
just
we're
take
supposed to buy
it.
time, right? But they just make it.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah, Kenner's, they just take forever.
they just make it.
Kenner's for the last 20 years realized they weren't billing any of the commercial businesses for trash. Like when they got a new borough manager, Brian Cole. And he figured it out because he bought the brick house. He was like, I'm not getting trash billed. And when he went and found out that none of the businesses in the borough had like a trash bill in 20 years.
And they were just eating that.
Yeah.
Bill.
You might wanna wait until Mr. Miller joins though. And technically you do have a quorum.
They're not like back here. I don't know. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, keep you with the borough.
Well, it gets different sections. So, so what Highland did, really, the main section is gonna be.
Right.
That would really be the main section. So there's already 2 turn lanes there.
Oh, there they want you to do.
So we're asking them updoing it, because to do it, it's just, that's why you
Okay, I got you. And they asked you to do inside, you know, where you will put the new building.
Yeah, so Highland says that internally with stops on that.
Okay, I guess the first order of business is to reorganize our illustrious committee, nominees for committee chairperson. Do you have any nominees for chairperson of this illustrious committee? Chairperson. What do I say?
Committee.
This committee here.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Sure. We'll fix that next year.
Summon every month.
Like to nominate Ron as chairperson.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor of, Mr. Lee, the, chairman of the commission? Opposed? Motion carried. Motion needed to table approve or deny appointment of the committee chairperson. We just nominees in reverse. So, how many nominees do you have? Done?
Well, do you wanna nominate a vice, so in Ron's absence, there's someone else to
That's a
fill
good
in?
idea. We have a nominee for vice chairperson. I have Second, motion and a second. Any other candidates? Okay, all in favor of Mike as vice chair of the planning commission, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. All right, we're good. Public comment. Do you have any public comment? No public comment. Okay, moving right along. 2000 Cambridge Avenue, Highlands Preliminary Final Land Development Plan, parts A and B. I guess this would be an appropriate time to turn this over to someone to explain that to us.
That's you, Phil.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Bill Fredericks. I'm with RDS Associates. With me is Kurt Evans with the Highlands. We were here in December and talked through the plan.
Do you want the laser pointer?
Sure.
Sorry to make you walk down there.
That's okay.
It's on.
We were here in December and kind of talked through the plans. At that point, we had a few minor technical items. Talking through it with the PC, it was recommended we resubmit those plans, clean up those few technical items, come back in front of you for recommendation. So as you see, the plan hasn't changed. We did resubmit the plans, got the most recent McCarthy letter from January 27th. There's one minor item in there about the sanitary sewer connection from building 2. I talked with Craig about that and how we're gonna handle that connection. Otherwise, I think it's mostly administrative. It's waivers, it is signatures, it is letter of credit, seals, those kinds of things. There's a few agency items, so we need the MPS permit. It's been sitting with DEP since July something. So I have spoken with Nathan Phillips. We were supposed to get a review letter 3 weeks ago and still don't have one. So we're pushing with them.
You know that Burke's now does the individual permits.
Yes, we talked about that at the beginning, and we submitted prior to, and they got them, you know, I guess it was a couple months ago, whatever it was.
Right. They just got it last week.
Oh, was it last week? Because I know a guy, Lehigh, I said with him on my PC, sorry for it. But yes, he recommended it. And I was like, maybe I should just pull my permit and give it back, back to Burke.
Might be faster.
So we're waiting on that approval. Again, I don't see any issues. I mean, we've addressed the items, but again, we have to go through the process. And then the other item that we talked about last time was the sanitary sewer. This project flows to the West Lawn Interceptor, which is owned by Spring Township. So initially there was discussion of if there was a moratorium on it. We went through our items, we talked to Spring Township, there's no official moratorium on it, is what we were told, which is good from a DP perspective, because you can get your approval a lot easier. But we have been having conversations with Spring Township. At our last meeting, we were asked to provide, flows from our site, so we've done that. Showing what we were flowing, what we would propose, what we would be proposing to flow. With that, we have asked Spring Township for their capacity analysis of their line. Talking through the conversations, it sounds like it's an I&I issue, which is an infiltration and inflow issue with stormwater, because the only overflows are during heavy rain events. So essentially, we've asked them for a sanitary sewer capacity analysis of that line, i.e. you take rooftops or EUs and you do a capacity calc on that pipe. There are things you can do to help solve I&I, manhole lids, watertight lids, check for cracks in pipes, those types of things. So we are in conversations with Spring Township to resolve that item. Other than that, I think that's what we talked about at our last meeting. I would request that the Planning Commission, I'm requesting this right, amend the agenda, because in addition to the motion for the recommendation for the final plan and the fee in lieu of the traffic studies, I think Michelle and I were talking, we never actually took action on the rest of the waivers. So the one meeting we had talked through all the waivers and all that, but I don't think we ever got full recommendation. So I would just ask if the PC would amend their agenda to include recommendations on the waivers as well. With that said, I can talk through any of the waivers we requested. What's noted on the agenda, 11.5, is we asked for a waiver of the traffic study. The limit on the traffic study is 50 units. We were at 56, so we were just over the limit. in lieu of that, waiver, we would offer, 11.5, which is a proposal we got to do what would it take to do the traffic study. So rather than actually do the traffic study, we would pay the fee of 11.5 in this case. So with that said, is there any questions or anything on the plans, that you guys have questions about?
Well, I would agree that the planning commission needs to make a recommendation with regard to the waivers before they can consider action on the plan. So if the planning commission is so inclined, I'd recommend that you consider amending your agenda to add the topic of waivers related to this plan.
So
I second it. You have any questions? All in favor? Aye.
Public comment, public comment.
Well, public comment? Nothing? Okay. I guess we now need to talk about the amendments.
Specific waivers, yeah.
So,
The report letter from Park Engineering, in here talked about the following recommendations. I saw no recommendations. I would like the borough engineer to make recommendations.
On the waivers?
Yes, please.
Okay, well, he's gonna go through and explain them, and then we can, the first one, I think, is plan scale, is that preliminary final?
Yeah, so,
303?
yep, so the first one is 303, is just preliminary, just doing a combined preliminary plan of, approval. We address all preliminary and final plan requirements when the plan said it's not a phased plan, so we're not breaking it up. So that's just kind of simplifies the process.
So what they're basically giving up is that preliminary plan approval, they got that separately, they could go out and build all the site improvements excluding the vertical construction. So by combining the two together, they're basically not allowed to build anything until the final plan's recorded. If they meet, and we reviewed the plan in accordance with preliminary and final on top.
What is your recommendation?
It's totally up, the planning commission here has historically preferred plan, preliminary final plans.
So you recommend that we do that?
Yeah.
Thank you.
so are there other waivers?
Yeah, there's,
Are we gonna take them
there's,
individually, or are we gonna do them as?
I'm going to,
Seven? No, 10.
10, yeah.
probably on the second.
Technically 11, because you got the extra.
Yeah.
school
Yeah, the one
money.
you added.
Typically, you do them individually.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
I'll make a motion for, to allow preliminary final. Second.
Second. Opposed? Any discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Number one.
So the second one is 441, it's a plan scale, to allow a plan scale of 1 inch equals 20 and 30 feet. Just the size of the plan, size of the site, scale of the plan, it just fits in. I think the ordinance can be, sometimes ordinances are a little prescriptive, it's 1 to 50 a lot of times.
That's all, it's allowed, 150.
So we're just asking a waiver, essentially shows a larger area on the plan set.
We have this waiver on almost every plan. The next time we revise the sale though, we're gonna fix that, to put all the standard engineering scales, rather than just 1 equals 50.
I'll make the motion to.
So you recommend, Steve, you recommend it?
Yes. Some of these I'm gonna have no opinion on, they're totally up to you,
Still looking for your recommendation.
okay?
Okay, we have a second. Second.
Second.
Yeah. Okay. All in favor of the waiver regarding the scale size of the plan, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No.
The next one is 4011P, which is to waive the requirement showing existing boundary monuments. If you could pull the plan back up, how big is the campus?
116 acres.
So we are dealing with like 3 acres internal to the site, so really 3 is asking, we're 3 acres internal, not really touching anything on the boundary, so 4014P, we're asking a waiver to show existing boundary monuments on the outside of the site that we aren't touching or affecting.
We have no problem with that.
You have a motion to accept the,
You can almost do the 3 and 4 together, they're the same thing,
Okay,
it's just 2 different sections.
all right, take that. Take suggestions. Move
Yep,
forward.
want me to do the next one too? Yeah, 4011V is essentially the same thing, showed existing and proposed street monuments, same type of thing, we're internal to the site, no proposed streets, no proposed right of way.
And you don't have public streets, so you're gonna put.
We're all right with it.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve section 401 411P.
The waiver,
Waiver
requirements.
approve a waiver of the requirements regarding existing boundaries and proposed street monuments 411P and 411B.
I'll make that motion.
You have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
5028 is to reduce, street intersection separation. Again, these are all internal streets inside the site. It's a retirement community, so low traffic volumes. What this waiver is requesting is this intersection between what will be a future Drive A to the site and an existing intersection at Bray Circle and Gales Song Drive. This is less than the 200-foot separation requirement. This is stop control. And this is stop control this way, free flowing that way. So the waiver request is 200.
What is the distance?
145. Yeah, 145.
And this was previously discussed at the PC that the preference was to yield on the distance to have the four-way intersection line up rather than have an offset. They could have slid that intersection 60-some feet to the northeast and gotten the 200, but then we'd have an offset intersection by 60 feet.
Flip back.
No recommendation?
We'd recommend, I think that's actually a safer thing. I'd rather see the driveways lined up than offset 65 feet.
Thank
So,
you.
all we would recommend there.
Okay, do we have a motion to reduce requirement of 200-foot separation for 502.8C?
So moved.
Second? Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried, 502.8C waiver. Approved. 502.9A.
50298 is clear sight triangles. This one relates to building 2 and the exit from to the parking garage. Technically, because it is a drive, it does have the 75-foot clear sight triangle. This one has 50 feet, it meets all other setbacks. It is a private drive on a low volume Gales Long Drive. This goes back to 16 cottages on Gales Long. 14 cottages, and then 4 for the barn project right here. So it's a low volume driveway. It is 50 feet, so it has sufficient stacking for 2, and then you would have internal stacking within the parking garage itself. So we were asking for relief to take the 75 down to a 50-foot clear sight triangle. It does meet all safe site stopping distance, which is what PennDOT measures when you go to a stop sign, look left and right, make sure you have clearance to pull out safely.
Yeah, we would support that. That typically is for a non-stop control driveway where you're rolling up and you're not stopping. So when you have a stop condition, the PennDOT safe site distance controls. While ordinance requires that, it's not really applicable in this situation, so they ask for a waiver to cover themselves. So we could either say it's not required or give them the waiver, whichever the planning commission feels more appropriate.
Okay, do we have a motion to accept the application for the waiver of the clear sight triangle requirements under 502.9A, parentheses, A, close parentheses?
So moved.
Second? Second. Do we have any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion carried. 509.5A.
5095A is the traffic impact study. A traffic impact study is required to do it's a 50-unit threshold. We are at 56, so we're just over the threshold. This project is internal to the site. It is a retirement community. We did provide some trip generation. I think it was 13 peak hour trips, which is pretty low traffic volume wise. So we are asking a waiver. Understood that the borough typically allows a fee in lieu of the waiver, so we did get a proposal. Yep, there is for $11,150. So we would request a waiver of this section based on a fee in lieu of $11,150. I said it correctly.
Well, we had TPD review, they felt that was appropriate price to do that work, and historically on these ones that are just around the limit, the borough has taken the fee in lieu of rather than having the study done, so. If, I have no opinion one way or the other on it, the fee is appropriate, it's just whether the borough's, didn't seem like the planning commission were really, Craig Richardson was concerned about looking at detailed traffic for this addition to the Highlands.
Yeah, the
Being
main,
that was looked at in totality when the Bulk Highlands project was planned and built, whatever now, 30 years ago, 28 years ago.
and the main intersection that would be studied, I believe, is
Would be
Cambridge.
Cambridge.
And that already has, correct me if I'm wrong, I think a left and a right to turn in at the
Yeah.
Highlands entrance, so it would probably show that it's more than sufficient.
So what that allows is then the borough can use that to, like right now, we're doing a Green Light Go project where we're redoing all the traffic signals in the borough and upgrading them. So that can go into that fund and be used as a match for other traffic improvements that are going on borough line.
And what we're talking about now is consistent with other discussion we've had with respect to this, Jeff.
Yeah.
Okay, 509(5)A, waiver of the traffic impact study, with payment in lieu of a fee of $11,500 to the motion to accept that.
Make that motion.
A motion, second.
Second.
Second, any discussion? All in favor of waiving 509(5)A, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. 509(5)A, same thing, same one, right?
No.
So, is this B? I have it as B in my notes. The next one.
It says A twice.
I think it's B.
Must be big, yeah, it's probably.
So, 509(5)A is specific to traffic, 509(5)B
Is the other
is other
impacts.
other,
Physical, economic, recreation, all those.
correct. So these are the studies, so we provide some level of analysis towards these studies within the other information we submit, so sewer, water, as we're going through now. There's historic and archaeological resources, which again, the campus is developed, so that was done previously, and, you know, there's little chance of impact. Environmental impact, we did provide a geology study, infiltration study, there's been borings on the site. So we're just asking a waiver of these specific studies as it relates to necessarily the borough requirements, but do know there was a level of analysis done and provided throughout the process. It just didn't necessarily fall into the specific itemized sections of it.
Comments?
Well, anything that we needed to look at, we already looked at through the stormwater and erosion control studies, which dealt with that. Water, Jim Babb looked at. I guess the only thing that's really still semi-open in there is the sewer issue to be resolved with Spring Township. But I think everyone's aware of what that issue is. I think it just has to be resolved. And then whatever necessary agreements have to happen between the developer and the borough and the township to make that happen.
So should any waiver be worded as we remove that section 590.5B be waived except with regard to sewer? Is that necessary?
Personally, I mean, elsewhere in the letter, it lists the sewer issue being open and needing to be resolved before final plan
Correct.
being released or recorded.
Yeah, they will not be able to get permits to do their project until the sewer issue is resolved. And on the agenda is a proposed motion for conditional plan approval, and that conditional plan approval will include reference to all the outstanding comments in the McCarthy engineering letter, and that is typically how that motion is made, and that review letter includes reference to the requirement to have the sewer issue resolved before they can move forward with the project. So, I don't think you need to tie the sewer issue into your consideration of the waiver of 595B. You can do that as part of the consideration of conditional plan approval.
Thank you.
Question, Chris, do we have to articulate the miscellaneous impact studies?
No, they're all under 595B, so if you waive 595B, you are capturing all the other impact studies other than the traffic impact study.
So we have on the table a waiver for the impact studies except for the sewer.
No, except for traffic. And I would recommend you grant the waiver of 595B based on our discussion. And by granting that waiver, you are not giving them any escape from resolving the sewer issue. They still need to deal with it.
Okay, so, put that in English. Do we have a motion to waive 590.5B, except as it impacts the sewer issues? What?
I asked that the motion be amended to simply waive the section 590.5B requirements.
Okay,
That would be my recommendation.
so we have a motion.
Second.
We have any discussion on the motion? All in favor of waiving 590.5B impact study, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
You probably do these two together, and maybe just explain what you're doing for the
Yep.
walkway system.
Yep, so, 9 and 10, 602C and 602D, we're asking for a waiver to install vertical curves on both sides of the street and a waiver requirement for sidewalks on both sides of the street. So, again, private streets, internal to the site. We are providing curbing within the parking lot area. Gale Song and Bray Circle both don't have curb at the moment. So, I believe our curb starts kind of right around the radii here and takes it back into the site. So there's no proposed vertical curb along there. And as you can tell, there's no sidewalk along here either. We are proposing sidewalk along Gray Circle to connect internally into the internal sidewalk connection, which would get you, to the main part of the campus. At one of our meetings, we added a sidewalk that came along this side and connected down for building 2, and then you got sidewalks around the building. It's really just a waiver of that section of Gale Song, with regards to sidewalk, and then vertical curb along Gray Circle and Gale Song. Again, private streets, not dedicated, maintained by the Highlands.
And none of your private streets except the parking areas have curb currently.
Correct,
That's how the development was planned.
Correct.
Okay, do we have a motion to waive requirements regarding vertical curbs and sidewalks as applicable to the outstanding plan at this juncture?
I make that motion.
We have a second? We have a second. Any discussion on that waiver, which incorporates 602C and 602D, correct?
Yes.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Alright, we got one more, it's technically two sections, 310C4 and 310C8. And we're requesting a waiver so that we can place inlets along the curb portion of the curbing within intersections. What this is again, privately owned, privately maintained. Where these, I think it's this point right here in particular, inlet ended up at a low point. We're capturing it within our stormwater system and taking it into our basin facilities. Just the way the grading worked out, there's a low point right there, and we're requesting to place an inlet right on that curve. Again, privately owned, responsibility of the islands to maintain and to own.
So we're just moving.
So it's not, doesn't actually even exist yet, right? We're just proposing it. So I think what the intent is you would have two inlets right there and create a low point, which would make sense if you do classic crosswalk intersection type of thing. Just the way the grading worked out with the street gutters, I believe there's an inlet right there. So the waiver is really to request to allow an inlet on that curved portion of the curb.
Yeah, is it updated? Okay, so,
So we have a recommendation to waive the inlet requirements modified according to the.
January 25th.
As exhibited by 301C4 and 310C8. Motion?
I make that motion.
Motion, second? Second, motion and second, any discussion on the inlet issue, waiver?
I'd like to know what the borough engineer recommends.
It's really, again, meant for two public road intersections where you don't have a stop sign, and you don't want people driving 25 miles an hour and hitting an inlet going around the curve. It's stop controlled here in private roads, so you're not gonna have that situation. If it was two dedicated borough streets that we were gonna own, we wouldn't want that.
So you're okay with it?
Yeah.
Thank you.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried, 310C4, 310C8, approved.
Thank you very much. I think that was the last of our waivers.
questions?
So the one thing you did not do when you amended the agenda was also amend it to include taking any type of conditional plan approval. So the planning commission needs to decide if they wanna take any type of conditional plan approval. Oh, no, I'm sorry, it is on there.
It's under B.
Yes. So the planning commission needs to decide if they wanna grant conditional final plan approval subject to all outstanding items in McCarthy's review letter dated January 27th, I believe. Or if you'd prefer to see some of those items cleaned up and the applicant come back to a future meeting to discuss that further. The current time extension that the borough accepted from the developer extends beyond the March planning commission and council date, so you're okay with either option.
So what's your suggestion based on the number of issues we talked about? How significant are they that we need to postpone this week for getting it right?
Honestly, the biggest issue in my opinion is sewer, because we haven't submitted a sewer planning module yet. So typically we can take action on the final plan without the module at least being submitted to DEP. So that's kind of the only reservation. I think everything else in the letter they can comply with. So it would just be the sewer issue, which is mostly in Spring Township in their hands. The borough has a very minor, we don't own that line that has the issue. That's Spring Township's line entirely.
So what's the impact of delaying what you're doing until you get that sewer thing resolved as opposed to getting conditional approval at this point?
So say if we come back before you, I'm not sure there would be any real updates to the plan per se, right? It's really just a sewer planning type of issue. Understood we need to move through, and we are working with Spring Township and if someone flows. Again, we did find, well, at least digging as far as we can tell, there's not an official moratorium on the line, which means we actually have started to prep the planning module to make submission to. And we do have plant capacity, so that's a big, we do have JMT capacity as well, so that's a big one. That's a big item as well. You know, we would ask you would consider recommendation. I mean, I think if we come back before you, I mean, it's really just to tell you about the sewer, and then we finally got DEP approval. But again, that's entirely up to you guys.
Is there any downside in this, Chris, to moving this forward?
Well, if you recall, a few minutes ago, there was a waiver granted to allow a one-step review process instead of a separate preliminary and final plan. If they had gone through a two-step process, I don't think we would have gone to final plan without having some resolution of the sewer issue. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong. So I think it may be appropriate to just wait until they have a resolution of the sewer issue before you consider a conditional final plan approval. But that will require them to come back again to give you an update on that issue.
It'll also require you to take action on another time extension at next month's meeting.
Why do they have to come back to us instead of telling the borough engineer that they've satisfied?
Well, you could do that.
Sure.
If you're comfortable with that process, that would be acceptable. I mean, that would be a conditional plan approval, and then the engineer would be the one to determine if that condition had been met.
And we still have to vote on it? No.
Well,
If you vote on it.
if you vote on it now, it does not have to come back to the planning commission unless there is some substantial change in the plan that you've already seen.
And if we vote on it now, the ball's in the engineer's court to receive the sewer issue appropriately.
That's right.
And then he goes to Michelle and says done, and then it goes to council.
Yes.
Yeah, it's similar to any time you give a conditional approval, and then, I mean, Chris will be involved too, because there's bonding and agreements and all that stuff that all have to be completed before, you know, if you vote to conditional approval and council does tomorrow, it would have to go through all that, and then so those plans would come back, well, not actually to a meeting, the planning commission would have to sign them, council would have to sign them, and then report them.
And just to clarify one thing that you said, Ron, council will, assuming PC makes a recommendation for conditional plan approval today, council will act on that tomorrow. Other than you as chair of the planning commission and council president signing those plans, once they go through everything else, and Jim, I, and Chris sign off on that, council will never see them or speak with them again.
So I guess my only question is with regard to bonding and all that stuff, which is not a sewer related to the project, are there issues there that need to be cleaned up? that are
No, and
significant?
those are typically handled as conditions on the plan approval. There's an improvements agreement, there's a stormwater operations and maintenance agreement. Those are things that are typically handled as conditions. So, that's not anything that would hold this up. The only thing that is a potential hurdle really is the sewer issue. But if you're comfortable deferring that or, assigning the responsibility to administer that piece of it to the engineer and me and our interim manager, we're good to go.
And all of those issues are related to Spring Township, right?
It's the Spring Township line, correct, yeah.
Okay, so we'd like to
Well,
articulate.
it seems to me that certainly protects the residents of Lyme Missing, but it also makes a more efficient process, makes it less expensive for folks. It seems to me it achieves our goals.
So efficiency is what we pride ourselves in. So can somebody articulate a motion to the effect that we cover this issue now?
Well, if, based on our discussion, my suggestion would be to consider a motion to conditionally approve the Highlands apartment plan, subject to compliance with the outstanding items in the McCarthy review letter dated January 27, 2022. And that, I think, is sufficient.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, you have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Good to go.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it. Appreciate your time.
Item 5.
See you tomorrow night.
You really don't need You're welcome to,
They won't have any questions, Bob? All right, then I'll see you tomorrow.
No, if you wanna come tomorrow, you can, but I don't have to.
and say, Bill, we've been meeting for like 2+ years now.
It's time for your notice.
Good salesman.
Yeah,
It is a.
Thank you very much.
no problem.
Keep you in the loop on
We just need to.
Thank you both. Thanks, everybody. Does the Netflix thing? Called the Billions?
Okay, item 5 on the agenda, 1139 Lehigh Avenue.
Good evening. That's close enough for me. Would you feel, so I don't have to mush mouth, open this up since I'm sufficient distance from all and I've been vaccinated? Just introduce myself, I'm John Hofford, Hofford Surveyors. I'm representing the Sarah Goulas residence, which is proposed for 1139 Lehigh Avenue in the borough. The actual ownership is taken under the name of 1139 Lehigh Avenue LLC. Mr. Gregory St. Goulas being the member. We have 2 waivers before you, and it's all relative to not subdivision or zoning. It's subject to the stormwater ordinance. During the stormwater ordinance, when someone wants to construct something, they are supposed to comply with certain sections of your ordinance. Section 305 requires basically infiltration. Infiltration is that mechanism which puts the additional impervious surface or the runoff into the ground and then into the underground aquifer. That is the intent of the purpose of 305. In this particular case, what we had to do was, it was requested and then we provided additional soil testing of the site. We engaged the services of Berks and Envirotech, Mr. Alan Madera. He is typically an SEO or sewage enforcement officer for multiple municipalities. He in fact soil tested the site and found that there was a limiting zone in the site, which meant it was too much clay, not enough impervious allowance to go for the water to go down through. In addition, they also did a percolation test just to see how fast the water would percolate down to the ground. And his comment was immeasurably slow, basically did not move. So therefore, because of the poor soil conditions. Not to mention that this is an underlying area of limestone, carbonate geology. I'm not gonna say prevalent to sinkholes, but those are the main factors with a limestone base or underground area. So for that reason, 305, stormwater recharge, basically water quality, cannot be achieved because of the existing soil conditions. So therefore, we're going to request a waiver of section 305 at this point due to the fact that the soil conditions do not warrant infiltration or the water quality. The second waiver that we'll be requesting is basically section 308. Now, your ordinance is broken down into multiple sections, 305, 6, 7, 8. 305, 6, and 7 are relative to basically small areas being developed, where you're under a certain threshold, and what you're doing is you're offsetting your impervious surface and putting into an underground facility, and the typical storm events that you're analyzing is a 2-year post compared to a 1-year pre. So as the site is today, you have a lawn condition. That's exactly what it's been. Tomorrow, you're gonna have a house and some additional driveway and a walkway. That will be your post condition. And what you're supposed to do is compare those two storms and then hold back the increase or the difference between those two storm events in some type of above ground, underground stormwater facility. So we did that and submitted that to the borough for review. Based upon the original creation of 1139 Lehigh, it was after your stormwater management ordinance was in effect. Actually, it was only just approved about a year and a half ago, the subdivision, which created this 12,000 square foot lot. Due to the size of the lot being less than a quarter acre, due to the size of the existing proposed dwelling or home that's going on this particular lot, based on the simple mathematics, this particular site did not qualify for the exemption status. Because of that, rate control kicks in. You're saying, what is rate control? It's analyzing every storm event as if this were the Highlands. The 1, 2, 5, 10, 25, 50, and 100-year storm events will have to be contained on site. What does that mean? Pick a 100-year storm, Agnes. How much runoff is coming off that site today as a lawn versus how much water is coming off that site with a driveway and a house? You have to contain the difference for every storm event, 1 through 100. Basically, this type of stormwater analysis is only done on larger sites, typically, not residential. But in this case, because of the criteria set forth in your stormwater ordinance, it comes through that it's supposed to be done. It's a big difference. Typically, what would have done in this particular case to offset 305, 6, 7 would have been a stone pit in the front yard. Stone pit fills up. Once it fills up, there's 2 metering 4-inch pipes that go out to the curb, and it goes down the gutter like runoff would normally do it. In this particular case, because of the size of the house and the difference at a 100-year storm event, an Agnes condition, we have 6 24-inch buried pipes underground in the front yard and metering out to 2 4-inch pipes to the gutter. So basically what we're doing is we're taking a situation that, because of the stormwater ordinance, we're going from a stone pit to a major underground stormwater facility. But that's what your water ordinance requires. I'm not saying that it doesn't, it does. When you look at the letter of the law, that's exactly what the stormwater requirements are. I am saying this may not be the intent of how strict the ordinance was supposed to be. Again, this is a residence, I'm gonna guess, not having it off the top of my head, probably 3,000 square foot home, maybe a little bit larger, but on a 12,000 square foot lot, you know, the exemption criteria does not qualify. So, the second part of the request for relief is that 308, the rate control requirement, not be fulfilled in this particular case, or not be done at all. So therefore, what we're requesting is that no control be done, just because of the type of event that has to be handled. I know it's a lot to take in because everyone's going, I know where my stormwater goes when it rains. It goes into my gutter, down spout, out to the street. Well, almost every home in Wyomissing has been built on that predication that there's no individual stormwater requirements. But due to MS4, the requirements set forth, you know, there are certain things that one's supposed to do. But this just seems to be rather excessive for residents in Wyomissing. So that's my spiel. I am sure you're going to want to request an opinion from either staff, your engineer. So I think it appropriate if you would like to open discussion at this time for either one of those two requested waivers, and that's waiver 305 and 308.
Okay, so before we start peppering you with questions, let's talk to our guy and see what he thinks.
Well, let's just get,
Presentation.
the letter asks for 6 and 7.
Yeah, it's collective.
Okay, so there's really twofold here. So they submitted a design which didn't meet 305 or 308, didn't meet a lot of them. John then redesigned it to hold the required volume in the bottom of the bed, which then met rate control with the pipes and outletted it through the curb, and submitted their soil testing, which showed, as he said, minimal infiltration rate, de minimis, you know, it was almost immeasurable. So as we look at the design that was submitted and we last reviewed, we have no objection to granting the waiver of section 305 as it relates to that, because the soils on site do not allow groundwater recharge. But they comply with all the other sections of the stormwater ordinance. So I think the discussion on 305 is pretty simple. You know, they can't really control the soil on site. If it doesn't infiltrate, it doesn't infiltrate. And it's not, you know, not to say 3,000 square foot house is big, but it's on a small lot. It's not like it's on 100 acres where it doesn't matter. So I don't know if you want to talk about 305, because that was one request, and then get into the more complicated, time-consuming discussion, I would think, on 308.
I'd like to have a comment, Jim, if I could, before they go over that. I mean, is that all right or what?
Well, it's up to the chair.
I mean, I can speak,
You're the.
I'm the owner,
You're
yeah.
the owner,
Sure.
yeah.
Is that fine?
I have no objection.
Okay, I appreciate it. Just to give you a little bit of my background and with Wyomissing, you know, and I've always been a believer. I had the house in the circle, bought it from Youngstadt, sold it to Timoshenko. George and, you know, Scalise, I had that lot there already, right here on the, sold that to them. I don't know, probably 3 or 4 other homes, the one that Grande bought, built, I bought that from him. So I'm real familiar with everything, where he's had a good relationship and everything else. And Jim, I always respect everything, everybody here. The only, and I apologize to you, Michelle, I know I was sending a lot of stuff back and forth. I don't wanna, I'm not this gorilla, you know, like I'm coming in here with lawyers and everything else. The only conversation, Jim, that I did have with Ed Kang was before, and I didn't know that you didn't know this, Michelle, was he feels, he's a very, you know, very highly recommended attorney out of Philly who's been, you know, I've been involved in major lawsuits. So for that, and he's always won these lawsuits. So what it was, Jim, was, and no disrespect, he didn't believe that us buying that lot in 2019, we were buying it as an approved lot. The damages that we would have right now would be well over $150,000 in cost, because when we went to build the house, I apologize to you, because I thought Jill referred that back to you. So when you gave the opinion that you didn't think that this is a new when we bought it, it's like you can't change a lot and say now you can't build 10 homes if it's approved for 10 homes. So his recommendation is there is damages. I'm not looking for damages at this point, and I'm not looking to fight. That's just so everybody here.
Well, Greg, on that
I
point-
love why I
on the
miss
point
it.
of the subdivision, that subdivision showed no house on this lot and said future erosion control and stormwater management
Sure.
will be done at the time of building permit application.
Mhm. So what
Because
I'm
when
saying
that-
is it was
when that
approved.
lot- It
it
was
was
approved with
approved.
that condition.
Yeah, but I'm saying is, so it would stay when the approvals, and again, just let's try to get past that, because I don't wanna.
No, but I mean, that subdivision, that clearly came up in the review at the time of what are you doing for stormwater for the newly created lot? And it was noted on the plan, as well as in the approval in the minutes, that that lot had no improvements proposed at the time.
So-
But at the time of building permit, they had to do necessary
So he,
stormwater erosion
again, I don't
controls.
know his exact definition, Jim. He's just saying he doesn't believe that. He thinks that the way it works with townships, is that $50,000 down the road? I don't know that. You and I have been there before. And what I'm trying to say to everybody else is, this isn't about the money for me, it's about the right thing. The person who follows next to build a house. I have the cost just for the pipe,
Well,
just for the pipe.
I don't wanna cut you off,
Sure.
but I will, because what I'd like to see is, since everything that John said was fact, fiction, I'm not sure, but I guess what we'd like to hear,
Sure.
you have a problem, which came from the past. We're trying to.
Well, no,
figure out-
not at all. This is
we're
facts
trying
now
to-
moving
We're
forward.
trying to figure out how we move forward, so.
Sure.
I guess I'd like John to address, did everything you say with respect to 5, 6, 7, and 8, were you talking about the resolution of the issues as you see it, or were you talking about what would have to be done in a perfect world if you wanted it to be consistent with 5, 6, 7, and 8? Have you found a way around this, which you're now bringing to us?
What?
In which case, I'd like the people on the commission to
Right.
quiz you to see. if
Well,
it
as we
fits.
reviewed the plan that John has submitted lately, the
Right.
plan currently under review,
Right.
that we were actually already reviewed, and it's pretty much satisfactory other than the stormwater maintenance agreement, that kind of stuff.
Okay,
Complies with everything but 305.
okay.
Right, John?
That's
You agree?
So you're
305.
saying that the piping system that they're proposing, you will comply,
That complies with
It
rate
complies with
control, stream bank
Everything but
erosion.
305,
but you're
Right.
asking for a waiver of that.
yes.
They're asking for, if I understand it, they're asking for a waiver to not construct that system and just connect the roof drains to the curb. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
And I would like to add, I have very strong reservations about the planning commission acting on that request for the simple fact that you're setting a dangerous precedent for anyone moving forward.
I agree.
On top of, you're not being compliant with everything that was required of every residential property owner for even a 500 square foot swimming pool being added to their property pre-2020.
So they are doing the 40, what we're trying to get at is this, the reason we're asking for it is I think it's opposite of what you request, Michelle. Meaning is, I don't, because I can afford to put it in, you're talking $45,000 to $48,000. The pipe alone is $26,000. My cost, I do $5 million a year worth of pipe. My cost is $26,000, $48,000 to put this in. Every house, there isn't one house, the guy who bought on Evans, I mean, I talked to him, he has no 100-year plan for an Agnes storm. So what you're doing is creating that nobody else is gonna build in your township a house, because nobody else is gonna afford to put $48,000. Then neighbors, I talked to them, everybody thinks it's ridiculous. John Hofford can tell you in his own words, you know, the feeling of putting 6 24-inch pipes in a ground. 48, so what I'm saying is so we understand your concern, but I look at it differently, saying, now you block anybody in the future going, you know, Steph, you know, again, great friend, she's there doing that, so just for when I'm looking at it, I'm saying is, she's continued doing, you know, what she's doing, hit all rock, and there was, I don't wanna get into pointing fingers
Well,
there.
Steph has
at
a
Evans,
stormwater
you know
plan.
what I mean, so, what's that?
Steph did a stormwater plan.
I got that, but I said, when you look at it, and what was included, especially with Evans too, is how that came about. Again, I don't wanna get in the whole right to know request, I'm not the bully, I'm not the bull in the
And-
shop,
and
or anything
Evans
else,
was the
I'm just here to
existing house
say,
that was
I'm
torn
just here
down.
to say, I think it's setting a bad precedence for going forward, because once I do it, and I know the guy at Evans did it, and, you know, put that tank in, once a lot doesn't perk, any other township, he works in all of them, it's end of story, you move forward, you don't, this ordinance, anybody will tell you was written for the Berkshire Mall, any of these that would do a commercial project, so I think sometimes I'm willing to give you a $5,000 check instead of fighting in court over this. I'll give you the check and say, put it towards maybe working with, you know, them changing this and McCarthy on maybe making it flexible so somebody can build a house in your borough going forward. Because right now, what this does is say nobody will ever build again, and that's what I'm trying to present. The neighbors, nobody could ever imagine, I built, what, up there, Jim, $25 million, you know, building in Kutztown, and didn't have to go through this degree of where you're getting into, like, this is a house, it's a house, and nobody, it's ridiculous. I mean, this is like if you were doing.
These aren't new regulations. These regulations have been in place since 2004. The only thing the borough has changed in the last 4 years was creating easier regulations for small projects, under 1,500 square feet, additions, pools. Because up until then, somebody putting a pool in had to do this full plan. Because I know John probably didn't know what this plan was
You got
anyway.
a 1,200 square foot house here that was just built on Steph's lot. I mean, like, that's a brand new construction piece. We're not talking about the pool. That's as big as some homes. And she, again, you know, that's the
She did
difference.
stormwater.
But you're gonna understand when you look into it, and without getting in and tying everybody's name up, I put a lot of time and energy in this. I just don't wanna go that direction. What I'm asking is to have that relieved, because when that site doesn't perk, water flows to the curb. We only designed the first part of this because we thought it would perk somewhat, so we put the stone in. And then when it doesn't perk, any other township or borough, they don't go through this water runoff, especially for a house. It's dealt with on commercial projects, been involved with a ton of them. And that's the only, and not to argue, Jim, I'm just asking for that relief, because if it's my cost $48,000, what would it cost a normal person? So what you're doing is saying in this fact, that nobody else will ever build a house in Wyomissing. Because it's not, you just can't feasibly do it. And I think that's what John's trying to say. This is a house, and we're talking about the table down at the, you know, Schuylkill River. We're not talking about anything different. That one house is gonna affect it. So I disagree, Michelle, strongly on your comments of saying, we're gonna set a bad, these rules are made and these ordinances are made to work with. And to be here, somebody that supported the borough with police departments and everybody else. So I think absolutely you're wrong, and I'm just being honest, and I'm not trying to discourage anybody, but I'll fight for that. You know, that's all I'm saying to you. It's not about money for me, it's about the purpose of who's next in line. You're setting
So
such,
let me
you
just-
gave 7 waivers away right in front of this.
There's a
Regardless of
note on
anything
the
else,
recorded
I'm
plan
asking
that
for
created the lot.
a house. You just gave away 7 waivers that I made all kind of notes. Because what I'm talking about, you're talking about one home on the block that I should spend $48,000, my cost to build a house. That's gonna improve everybody else's.
So,
Can I just say something?
Absolutely.
I think what we're talking about now is what theoretically is not under scrutiny, because we haven't even gotten to the one that we have the problem with.
Like John said, you guys are right
What I
with your
want to know
ordinance.
is what happens to the last piece that you don't think we have solved? How big of a problem is that? Because that's the one piece.
Well, the piece they're asking for is essentially what I said, to not put any stormwater management in and just pipe the roof drains to the curb.
they wanna
That's
put,
what they're asking for by the
underground
second
drains,
waiver.
that's
That's 99% of, 100% of the whole, nobody else, John, is there anybody in this township that spent that money to put that system in,
Oh, shit.
ever?
I am unaware of any, but I don't do large projects.
And this is a small, this is a house, this isn't the Berkshire Mall or somebody's building a building, which is what this ordinance works off of. So that's the difference, and that's what I'm trying to do, is just saying, you're right, he's right, Jim's right by the ordinance, and so is Michelle. But you're setting you're setting something that just isn't right, and every ordinance has its waivers. You just gave 7 of them. So what I'm trying to ask for is to do the right thing and set this up that you are a borough that'll work with residents that support the borough. Because it's just not, it doesn't change
The question, Greg,
one
is
house.
we're under an MS4 permit, and when they do an audit, they don't look at the big projects that have MS4 permit, that have NPDS permits. They look at these small ones. And now, we have a design that meets everything except 305, and then we're not gonna build anything. So when they do that audit, all those plans are in the file. I mean, you're saying, do nothing. That's essentially what you're asking for.
No, I'm asking for a waiver in lieu of giving, instead of arguing this out over the next 3 years, in lieu of giving a check to you guys for $5,000 and maybe look back at that ordinance and see if you can adjust it to say, okay, maybe there's some room here to amend it to say, for a house and only a house, there is an example of different from a commercial. I mean, this is the type of ordinance you would see on a commercial project, not on a home.
So
I think it's
first of
important.
all, every example you gave, the house on Evans was replacing an existing structure that was torn down and replaced.
It's absolutely not. Again,
There was a
you
house
say
there.
There is a
that,
house there.
it doesn't matter, it was
Could you let
redone
them-
and it's a new permit. You
Could
understand, I
let
have
them
the
talk
best,
without interrupting, sir?
By the
Sure, they
ordinance,
gave
you
you
get
that
credit for
notice.
prior impervious on that track.
I disagree. Again, I'm looking at the best lawyers in Philly, so we would disagree with that. We have all the documents, everything's done. So I'm just here to work with you guys and not be dealing with this 3 years from now. That's all I'm trying to say. And it's not a threat.
Can we
I'm
let,
not threatening. I'm trying to work with you to say, this is a house.
All right,
so can
Exactly.
we let them
He did
talk
not
without
do one
you
wrong.
interrupting?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry.
Thank you,
Sorry. Go ahead.
thank you. Would you?
So first of all, you're looking at the approved stormwater note that was on the recorded plan for the subdivision of 1148 Reading Boulevard that clearly spells out what the requirement is when the lot that we're here discussing today is going to be developed. I don't see how there's any ambiguity as to what is required based off that plan note.
So because number one, the lot did not perk. So at that point, it takes, now you have running, so nothing will change except for that little bit, and going off of a 100-year plan of Agnes, you're gonna take a resident that lives in the borough and supported this borough, and not say, okay, we'll take a $5,000 bill instead of $250,000 in fees, and I'm just telling you real life. I've been there, done it.
Didn't let me finish my statement, which is I'm not saying we should throw the baby out with the bathwater and require you to necessarily plan for a 100-year storm, but I think that in some sense, doing something other than just underground rain leaders that shoot out to the gutter, because I know one of the first calls I'm gonna get after this is approved is from the neighbor saying, how could you let this happen? What happens when my property floods with water? I get those calls now on properties where we have approved, recorded
Well, we
stormwater
did,
plans.
Michelle, and that's why I said, and I was absolutely working with you guys, where he said we can put the stone bed in, thinking that it would, just to help, like the stone bed in the front, which is still a $20,000, $24,000 ad. It's a reduction of it, but it's still a huge number, and once we found out that it didn't perk, then it was like, okay, no, and I know the neighbor, so no neighbor is gonna have the issue of, it's gonna flood now, because when it doesn't perk, the water just runs right off, it will not go into the ground. So trying to hold it in a tank or hold it and then bring it up and then it flows all out at once, some people would say is more detrimental because now you're having this big gush after the tank fills. So it's better to leave it naturally come down like it does now. So that's what I'm saying, I'm willing to give you a check for the $5,000, put towards maybe smoothing that
and this
out.
isn't a debate, Greg.
Sure.
Michelle had the floor, she gets to finish what she's saying.
It was
You
just
keep
answer. I thought
jumping
she was
in.
done. Well, no, I was answering her thing. just-
She was talking to the board, not,
Oh, I thought she
The
was looking
other-
at me, so I don't know.
The other final piece to this is, again, we specifically put in place a small project stormwater management ordinance last year to make it easier for residential property owners that wanna add 1,500 square feet or less of new impervious to their property. This project does not qualify for that. Outside of that, you have multiple residential property owners in the borough that up until 2021 spent upwards of $20,000 working through the stormwater management review process just to put in an in-ground pool. I don't think it's fair at this point in time to say you're building a 3,000 square foot home that does not qualify for our small projects ordinance, and you are not required to do anything for stormwater management other than put in roof drains that lead out to the gutter. That's my simple opinion based off of how the borough has handled this in my time here.
So I guess I just have one observation. One, the borough's been, and I've been on the planning commission a long time, very helpful to everybody that's walked in here and tried to even walk them through how to get things done. So while this may take a long time, if this is a one-off, it's a one-off because of the location of the property, the type of soil you're dealing with, the pitch of the property, and all that stuff, which these guys are looking to figure out a way to solve. I don't know if there's a solution, but is there a solution to this problem? And if it costs money,
well, okay, so there is the latest design, which I think was submission 2, right, you did initial and follow. So the second submission of the plan meets the entire stormwater ordinance with the exception of 305 for infiltration.
okay, so
And that's
the
the-
305 issue that's not resolvable and we're
No,
willing to.
no, 305, we would recommend, based on what was submitted, we would recommend granting a waiver of 305.
Okay,
And then if council follows it, then their permit will be issued to build.
But is that the $48,000 bill?
Yes.
No, it's.
So you're saying that's what will take
Yeah,
about
Yeah,
46,000
that,
to
if we get that waiver, because it doesn't hurt, so that's automatically a moot point, so that waiver,
Right.
because it doesn't apply anymore, 305, so that's.
No, Greg, they're trying to concentrate on just the 305
Okay.
portion. So if
So
you,
the 305
Actually,
won't apply.
the number you stated, whatever it was, 40
That's for
something,
putting in the next.
that's to build what John has drawn right there.
Yeah, that's what
Right?
John's saying, we shouldn't, again, you know, what we're feeling is, that's so excessive, it's for a commercial property, that is so overkill, it's unbelievable on a lot that doesn't hurt.
Well, do I understand it right, though, that the second, that you filed had the 48,000?
Yes, this is
Okay.
this is our worst case scenario, we're trying to get
And so
away
now
with.
we're talking about.
So we're talking about, so essentially they resubmitted the prior plans, no more on the table. This is the plan that was on the table.
Okay.
This meets the entire stormwater ordinance with the exception of the 305 groundwater recharge infiltration section. And because the soils won't allow it to infiltrate, we're recommending a waiver of 305,
okay,
which would allow them to build this.
okay,
That was request one that John
right,
Mhm.
okay.
wanted you to look at.
All right.
Then the second one would be to waive essentially the entire stormwater ordinance, and the roof drains would collect in a, 4-inch pipe and come out through the curb. And there wouldn't be any detention or any stormwater. So that's why I said the second one's a lot harder,
Yeah.
bigger discussion.
What John hasn't explained on that,
And
There
what,
are-
can you tell us who you are, sir?
I'm sorry, I'm with Greg, I work for Greg and I work with John.
Your name for the record.
But the
They need your name for the record.
Six pipe.
They need
Yeah,
your
Mr.
name,
Robert-
they need your name for the record.
I'm sorry, Robert Henning, Robert Henning.
All right.
There's 6 45-foot long, 2-foot diameter pipes on the ground. John, if you wanna just kind of point to it there,
Yeah, well,
and they collect the water.
so what happens is the entire roof downspout system is collected and it's put into either end just for a better flow. But yes, one can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 40-foot long, 24-inch SLCPP, which is the heavy-duty corrugated black pipe that you might see along the highway. Because of the elevations of the home, they've been set relative to the existing driveway so that this does not have to be redone. And I say it that way is, since this driveway is existing, we know the elevation of the driveway here and here, and so that one can get into the garage in a very easily manner. The elevation of the home is basically predetermined. It's all predicated upon the elevations of the driveway. And based on that, we have so much pitch from where the house is gonna be established out to the gutter. So therefore, we couldn't go with a 3-foot pipe. We had to go with a 2-foot pipe. And just because of the diameter of said pipe, with the allotted or allocated value or the storage volume of each one of these pipes, that's how many pipes we needed for the grade control to work, which is 308.
So are you telling us what you don't wanna do, or telling us what you will?
I'm telling you, that design complies, as Jim has just stated, that complies with your design completely,
Can-
100%.
Can we, to stop the confusion, can we take a vote on the first one? So that's off the table, then we can discuss the second one, rather than going back and forth
And
on
that's
the
just
two?
because of the soil.
Yes.
That's because the soil doesn't have a good perk rate and it doesn't infiltrate, and short of making them put,
Change the dirt.
well, no, they putting Toro system and irrigate your lawn with it, but we're not gonna make somebody do that in a residential setting. So,
So for 305 purposes, you don't have a problem with 305?
no,
I'll
th-
let you
this,
know what to show it.
this plan as submitted complies with everything except 305, and we would recommend the waiver of 305 in this case, because of the soils.
Agreed,
What's that?
agreed.
Okay. So, we have a motion to waive section 305's application to the project.
On condition that they meet those other,
Well, we're not into the.
no, what Jim said.
The plan right now, as submitted and we reviewed, meets all that. They don't have to change
On
anything.
condition that they follow the.
Yeah, they don't have to change anything on that plan as submitted if that's what they're gonna build, and then they only need relief from 305.
Condition on this,
I make that motion.
Okay. Second?
Second.
Motion and second, any discussion? Okay, so, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Okay, so we got 305, so now.
Now that that's resolved, the issue, what they're asking you for is to not do the plan, to just, right, and if I'm not, I know John, you, if I mistake, they wanna connect the roof drains through a roof drain connection line, I think they're coming out through 2 locations in the curb in that scenario, and let the driveway run down to Lehigh, and I guess the sidewalk in front of the house would do that as well. Is that adequately?
That is correct. The waiver, now the 305 is waived, only because we proved bad soils. We can't help it.
So this is what I'm talking about, 305.
Now
It's
we're
off the-
on 306 to 8. Now we're saying 1139 Lehigh Avenue LLC would like a waiver of everything relative to stormwater, as not to put this facility in the front yard and let the downspouts connect directly to the gutter line through the curb.
So the 6 pipes you just pointed to are the 6 pipes that would resolve 6, 7, and 8.
No.
You suggested
Yes,
you
yes,
want
yes.
to go on, you just want the water to come down the hill and go into the street.
Yes,
And that's what Michelle is
that's the
saying,
current waiver
doesn't come with a vote.
request.
I hope
You
I
gotta
like that.
understand, those 6 pipes only hold water. Once
Right,
there's a
that's the
pull,
problem.
they relieve out to the curb.
And Jim, that ground now, it won't take water at all. The issue.
The result of theirs was that modeling, which I think modeling of yours was solid, was clay modeling with rock,
Yes.
was within the limiting zone, created a limiting zone so they couldn't build it. You know, most of the plans we've seen come in for the houses either had some type of larger pit with all the roof leaders, or they put some smaller ones around, or they put a swale with an infiltration pit. The soil on this side doesn't let them put the infiltration pits and the swale that directs it to the pit. They have to create the volume and store everything and then meter it out. And that's what their pipes are. Well, that's what, in this proposal, the pipes are doing.
So let me ask this.
What they're asking for is to not put that pipe system,
Is there,
essentially.
is there room in the rear setback to increase the number of pipes in the front to as to dissipate the water? Because looks like your rear setback, there's room to play there, that if you had 12 pipes in the front, that would allow the water to dissipate without coming into the street.
There's nothing going to dissipate, so it's you're holding back the increase, and what's happening, instead of a pond that will slowly fill up and then meter out with like a 4-inch pipe, we're doing it underground.
Right. But
So-
will it go away?
In
the space?
essence, these are going to drain, eventually, they're gonna drain out to the gutter, but they're only gonna allow so much flow out of any one of those pipes,
Right.
which will meet today's condition. So this whole thing is in yard lawn, it runs across, and it runs down the gutter today. So there's a value to that, let's just say it's X. Each one of these pipes coming out, even during an Agnes storm, that volume will only be X, it's gonna be the same amount. It's a calculation, it's gonna leave out the same amount of stormwater runoff into your street, that's what's going there today. And then these pipes will fill up to allow the metering. But the problem is, obviously, the expense, the cost, to have that in one's front yard. And that's where
So is
we're at.
that's
But
something
also that they fill up, they just flow out.
Well, that's the issue. Michelle,
If there's
does that
an
solve
active-
the problem with these pipes in the front?
Something's better than nothing, I
I mean,
mean,
I'd be willing to, and again, I agree, I have no problem with Michelle's comments, and if Jim would back it, that we would do the stone that we originally did, which is about $25,000.
So now you're talking about not this, you're talking about another option.
It's one that was already, that we had if it did perk. We all,
Right,
but I understand Michelle saying we gotta follow something or give something. I know John feels heavily that we shouldn't be doing anything because of the cost regardless of it. Because when a lot doesn't perk, it flows into the street. So all you're dealing with is a little bit of roof water that's gonna be added to that. It's very, very minor. So even $22,000 is an extreme amount to just put stone in, but I'm fine. Like I said, I'm not here to fight. I know I'm not here, and if that appeases Michelle that something was done, then we can do that. That's already designed, and I think it gives everybody from that end, I'm not here to, because like I said, I'm here to work with you guys, I've always been.
Are you
It's not gonna
comfortable?
function, though.
What?
The stone's not going to function,
No.
When you look at this
because
last.
it's not gonna it's not gonna percolate.
So are you, John, are you saying in
This
that
isn't gonna
scenario that
function.
you,
I'm gonna answer your question if I may.
Mm-hmm.
If we go back to the original stone pit design,
that was in the back?
that's not gonna work.
That was in the back of
Because
the house,
there is
right?
no
There's no front.
percolation.
Right.
So what happens is, whatever facility is designed, it has to drain and empty. Or you're gonna have half-filled pipes with water in that'll never go away unless they dissipate.
Right, well, the question, the reason I asked the question, if that house were moved up the picture by, do you
It's
put
within
more,
zoning.
do you put more pipes in, giving them more time?
I
It's
see
on
what
the-
you're saying.
It's on the rear
Typically,
setback.
this is the 30-foot setback.
Right.
This is a 15-foot wide sanitary sewer easement that the sewer line comes and goes up to the original Fernandez house,
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Fernandez.
But this is the rear setback, so the house can't get pushed back
You
any
can't
farther.
because you don't want to, or you
Yes.
can't because you can't?
Because of the setback, that's your 40-foot
It
building
would need a
setback line.
variance from the zoning
It's
board.
built directly within a very small box.
Okay, so the
There's no
original,
room for deviation.
all right, so the original question is, does this solve the problem for the borough and the other people living on Evans?
The plan there?
Yes.
The plan there meets the ordinance with the exception of 305, which you waived.
But that's what they don't wanna do.
Yeah, they don't
All
want
right.
They don't wanna do it.
Well, I can speak from some experience, that's a very pitched lot. So water's coming downhill one way or another on that lot, and how much is really the question. If you're saying that problem is resolved with that, but it's not resolved if you don't have those pipes, then I don't think you have a whole lot of,
Well, we're trying to say,
Maneuver.
well, to answer that, we don't feel that we need to go off of an we think if we put, even at a worst case scenario, a couple 4-inch pipes or 6, it gives you, we don't need to go off of, like you said, the first original ones are a 2-year study. To go back and say we have to go off of a 100-year flood plan, that's what makes the pipes so big.
so have we ever compromised on that issue with respect to how much water could be generated by a lot, and we have modified what we expect of the builder? Or is this a hard and fast rule that we have to go by?
I don't know that we ever.
I don't know that we've ever had that request.
It's pretty new, right? The ordinance, pretty
The
new.
ordinance has been the same for 20 years.
Yeah,
The only thing that got added to the ordinance was the section to make it easier for under 1,500 square foot projects that didn't involve subdivision land development.
Is there anything that allows for the difference between the max end of the small projects ordinance and the volume that they're looking to accommodate?
By right, no, you would have to grant a waiver from this
Yeah.
stormwater management ordinance and set specific conditions as to what you want them to meet.
And essentially, all of those small, the small ordinance, you don't even need a surveyor or engineer, you can fill out a little sheet, it takes
Right,
like
right,
5 minutes. And they're sample things, they're all infiltration based.
But the infiltration is then the problem, because the lot won't.
Well, I think that's the problem with the size growing this large, is the no infiltration rate going out. They gotta hold everything instead of letting it infiltrate out as it's filling. So it's, it's like having a hole in the bucket as you fill it versus no hole. So they have to hold everything and turn the bucket over.
John,
But it's designed for a 100-year storm event, not a typical 2-year.
Right, but everybody has to respond to the same thing, so, so you don't.
What we would like maybe is, like to answer your question too, we can maybe request for a 10-year, which would give us an easy compromise to not doing a 100-year flood plan. I think, again, these ordinances, when these situations come up, this is just maybe one of them one-offs that happen, I don't know, but again, $48,000 means you're not building the house that 99% of people, that are gonna build, and then this would follow suit for any other house that would be built going forward, where I think these rules are made, or these ordinances are made to work with as situations come up. Like you said, maybe this is a one-off, but if there's an explanation behind it, say, okay, to give Michelle what she's asking for, we just gave away 7 variances or 7 waivers. We can give a variance, and that could probably be done pretty
Waiver.
quickly to do that, right,
Not
Jim?
variance.
or I'm sorry.
Planning commission and council grant waivers.
Yeah, waiver,
Well,
to
we're
put a
not
smaller
trying-
pipe.
We're not trying to compare one project to
I
another.
got it, I got you.
Because the stop sign in the Highlands versus this, which could be, I mean, we deal with all the time, people that have water runoff coming from somewhere and trying to figure out where it came from and how it got there. When they point to this one, they can say, we know where it came from, it came from you guys sitting around the table, because you said you didn't need to do that. So we need to protect the interests of the people that live in the area, and it's up to McCarthy and company to tell us 100 years, 75 years. I mean, I'm good with 75 years. Does that remove one pipe? If it does,
Yeah, not
okay.
significant.
But to say.
Your
we don't
ordinance,
need
your
pipes-
ordinance, we don't come up with the years, that's in your ordinance.
No, I know, but I'm saying, how many pipes do you need?
Well,
Of cour- I
well,
think
John,
that's
did you
fair.
run,